When we are talking about restoring the SnyderVerse, we have to take into consideration that Warner Bros. Has no interest in continuing Zack's universe, and they don't have an interest in it, not necessarily for monetary reasons, but because they don't want to admit that they have made a mistake in the first place. And what is really interesting to note here, and a new article that came out from, I think, SFX magazine, saying that HBO Max was the one who greenlit Zack Snyder's Justice League in the first place, and it had nothing to do with Warner Brothers to begin with, which is, not a surprise to say the least. And with HBO Max, they understood and saw the potential that movie Zack Snyder's Justice League has for the future, as it sets up an infinite number of spin-off projects while being a film of its own when you think about it. And I would like to just give you a quick glance or look at the numbers, which Warner Brothers, of course, has not released officially. They just released some misleading and cherry-picking statistics, like the first 5 minutes compared to Wonder Woman's first 5 minutes. And what is really interesting here is that Warner Brothers will not release the numbers for this week. They will release the subscription numbers for HBO Max after Godzilla vs. Kong releases, so that they can point to those numbers and say, you see, Godzilla vs. Kong brought in all of those subscribers and streamed views, or just streamed hours. And these statistics are courtesy of What's on HBO Max, so shout out to that account because they are doing an amazing job of promoting Zack Snyder's Justice League and What's on HBO Max as well. As you can see here, the Snyder Cut debuted this weekend with 1.8 million US households tuning in, and when you put it in comparison to WandaVision, for example, that was only 1.6 million, and that was of course a double episode debut on Disney Plus. And what is really funny here is that The Falcon and the Winter Soldier debuted last week on Friday, and that was considered the biggest debut on Disney Plus from Marvel and Disney in general. But even the Snyder Cut eclipsed that, because The Falcon and the Winter Soldier debuted with 1.7 million, and of course the Snyder Cut surpassed that number. So that's pretty interesting to note here, even though the Snyder Cut was a 4-hour movie, not a 45-minute TV episode or TV pilot. When you really think about these numbers, and when you compare Wonder Woman 1984 to Zack Snyder's Justice League, we have to talk about the fact that Zack Snyder's Justice League launched worldwide, so you can't just really look at the domestic or US numbers when you're trying to assess the whole situation. And with Wonder Woman was a really special case when you compare it to Zack Snyder's Justice League or any movie in general, because that was one of the first movies that ever debuted on a streaming platform at the same time as in theaters. And of course, it was a hotly anticipated movie and a sequel to the Wonder Woman film, which a lot of people loved. And that one debuted on Christmas Day, of course, when everybody was at home, and that hasn't really been a big budget blockbuster movie in almost like a year when you really think about it, back in 2020. But with Zack Snyder's Justice League, kind of came off Wonder Woman 84's, or just followed in the footsteps of Wonder Woman 84. When we think about the international numbers as well, you can see that it broke international records at streaming platforms in Brasilia and India and in Russia as well. So we have to take those numbers into account as well. We have to look at the holistic picture, if you will, like the whole picture, not just cherry picking certain numbers and data. And when you check out the number of engagements or peak engagements when you compare Zack Snyder's Justice League to Wonder Woman 1984, you can see that at the day of the premiere, which was of course for Zack Snyder's Justice League a Thursday, not a Friday or not Christmas Day even. It wasn't even on a Saturday or Friday. It was a Thursday. You can see that the peak engagement basically doubled Wonder Woman 1984's day after its Christmas release, which to me is really mind-boggling. But as you can see, Zack Snyder's Justice League was a huge success all over social media. And HBO Max will definitely greenlight the sequels or just spin-offs within the universe if the numbers are there, and the numbers are clearly there for the continuation of the SnyderVerse. But how can the SnyderVerse live on HBO Max? That is the more interesting question for me to answer. Is that when you think about the Justice League sequels, JL 2 and 3, there are two ways that those things can happen. Either as a limited series like Chernobyl, for example, or as movies themselves. And I would say that the next Justice League movies wouldn't necessarily be like a 4-hour long endeavor when you think about it, as this movie had a lot of ground to cover, and in my opinion, like Justice League 2 would probably clock around 3 hours, and maybe Justice League 3 would be this Return of the King 3.5-hour movie, but I don't really see them as like 4-hour epics. Of course, these movies would definitely shoot back to back like the Lord of the Rings movies did, and the reason why is that potentially saving a lot of money in this process when you shoot movies back to back, so you're shooting at the same locations, you don't have to rebuild sets, you can reuse those assets that you have, you don't have to pay the actors once again, you don't have to get everybody together, as a lot of people, mainly Henry Cavill, is really busy with Netflix. But what is kind of the bigger hurdle with these films is that the individual budgets for JL2 and JL3 respectively would probably be around $200 million on the very least when you are talking about shooting back to back. But when we are talking about these huge budgets, even now in the streaming realm of things, The Mandalorian's budget was $150 million. Of course, that was a TV show or a streaming show. And WandaVision's budget was $200 million. But what is really important here is that Warner Brothers dropped their $200 million budget movies on HBO Max day one. And I feel like that giving Zack Snyder his like $400 million to make his Justice League 2 and 3 is the next step in becoming the streaming king for HBO Max. So they have really pushed the envelope when it comes to just giving these like huge budget blockbuster movies on day one. And you can see that over at Disney, they don't have to do that. They charge you $30 for you to watch the new animated movies or even the new Marvel movies. They don't give them to you for free like HBO Max does. But when you think about the SnyderVerse, most of the shows or the movies would probably cost around ranging from $50 and $150 million. And that would mean that those shows would carry the Game of Thrones level of production value. Because of course even Joe Manganiello has talked about his Deathstroke movie, which would have been like a $40 million flick. And when you think about the SnyderVerse already has a rather wide audience, especially when you think about the hardcore fans. Of course, they made Zack Snyder's Justice League the possibility that it actually never should have been, but they made it possible. And when we think about getting new customers, it is always more difficult than keeping the already existing ones. And one of the main reasons backing that statement up is that you don't see a lot of new IPs in Hollywood as of late, like in the last 20-30 years, because making a new IP is a huge risk, and movies are so expensive nowadays that you cannot take any risk whatsoever, because you have to answer to your shareholders and make $500 million from a $100 million movie. But with streaming, you don't have to do that. With streaming, you are selling the platform itself, not necessarily the movie. And when you think about it, there is not a ton of new DC content on HBO Max as of yet. Of course, they are planning to do one show for one new movie from Warner Brothers, but in my honest opinion, it's nowhere near enough. And when you think about the SnyderVerse has this untapped potential, which could give you new DC content every single week when you really think about the possibilities, which I'm going to list later down the line. But when you also think about these movies, people, and I think rightfully so, deem streaming movies as content. But with Zack Snyder's Justice League, Zack's movies have this rewatchability that not a lot of other movies have, especially when you think about the comic book or superhero movie genre. And Zack's movies are not popcorn flicks. They beg you to rewatch them time and time again. And think about when you have something like Zack Snyder's Justice League on your platform, which I'm going to be honest, I have watched it 5 times already. And the movie has been out for like a week. And that's 4 hours, so I've spent 20 hours of my life watching this movie. And when you really think about it, when was the last time you actually did something like that for a streaming service? You probably just hop into the streaming service, watch the new episode of The Mandalorian, and then you wait for the next episode, right? You don't necessarily watch that episode over and over again. And that's a very rare thing to have a director who gives you that untapped potential with his movies. And to just give you a bit of a tease of what potential and rumored shows there could be, or just movies based upon the Snyderverse. To start things off, the Batman, or Ben Affleck's Batman series, would be an awesome way to start things off, as rumors have it that the show would be an 8 episode and 1 hour per episode limited series, and of course the script is already done. And of course we can talk about a Cyborg series, as I think there is going to be a lot of demand and a lot of pushback going in the way of Warner Brothers, because they fired Ray Fisher from The Flash, and guess what? He was one of the best parts of Zack Snyder's Justice League. His performance and his character was absolutely outstanding. And we could also talk about Wonder Woman 3 with Zack Snyder directing a flick, which I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but seeing Wonder Woman 84 and Zack Snyder's Justice League, I know who should be the director of the next Wonder Woman movie, and my bet is on Zack. And of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League has given us a lot of backstory and a lot of new characters. And one way to explore those characters would be the long-rumored Amazon show, which we have not heard a lot about. But in my opinion, what would be one of the best things to come out of the SnyderVerse is an Atlantean show. As in the history lesson, or during the history lesson, we are being told by Diana that the Amazons were betrayed and enslaved. And later down the line, when Diana talks with Arthur, we know that there was a war between the Amazonians and the Atlanteans. And I don't know about you, but I would love to see that war and these two tribes going against each other, Game of Thrones style. And of course, the Atom movie, or the series with Zack Snyder, has pushed back in the day at Warner Bros. We could also have the Joker and Harley Quinn movie after we see David Ayer's Suicide Squad. And the next on the list would be David Ayer's Suicide Squad in general. We could have the Deathstroke movie that Joe Manganiello has been talking about as of late. We could get a New Gods movie or series featuring Steppenwolf's betrayal and Darkseid's rise to power, and just a series about the apocalyptic or New God ways, which to me sounds utterly fascinating, as that was an aspect of Zack Snyder's Justice League that was utterly mind-blowing. We could also have a lower budget Flash movie with Rick Famuyiwa's script, as of course he was one of the directors who was tapped to direct the Flash before he parted with creative differences, and we know that he actually had a script done for the movie. And we could have numerous Nightmare spin-offs when you really think about it. And we could also have a Superman series with Henry Cavill, as of course Warner Brothers don't really want to go forward with his Superman for whatever reason. And we could have this Man of Tomorrow style after his arc finishes in Zack Snyder's Justice League Part 3 or 3. We could also have a Martian Manhunter origin series, and we could also have a Batgirl or GCPD detective series. If Batgirl is a part of the Batman, and as Joe Manganiello has talked about, she was actually a part of Ben Affleck's Batman script. We could also have a Carrie Kelly series, because we kind of know for a fact, as Zack has teased us, that Carrie Kelly would be the next Robin in his universe. And we could also have Bruce Kent as Batman, and we could also have a series based around that character, and that's kind of my rather less wild guess when we really think about how untapped the potential is for SnyderVerse spin-offs later down the line. But my last thoughts would be to not give up right now. Do not cancel your HBO Max subscriptions. Support HBO Max and Zack's films and Zack's universe and streaming as much as you can. Tweet about it and talk to people to see Zack Snyder's Justice League, to show the studio and HBO Max that there is actually demand for more within the Snyderverse. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would love to hear all of your thoughts regarding the Snyderverse in the comments down below. Please leave a like if you have enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this one, and I'll see you in the next one. And until then, remember to keep it insightful.